Hire Easy has been pretty incredible for executive search. I will say that. It just really seems to understand the nuances of leveling. I would say that I use the executive filter under the skills section pretty much daily.
Welcome to another episode of the Speakeasy podcast, powered by Hire Easy and the Outbound Recruiting Academy. I am so excited to have my special guest, Mathew, an executive recruiter at PayPal and a trailblazer in the talent sourcing community. I can't wait to dive into the topic of executive recruiting and the upcoming hackathon that she is hosting at the upcoming SourceCon event in April. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Thank you for having me.
We always start every single podcast with the one question. How did you get into talent sourcing and what are you currently doing right now?
I got into talent acquisition the same way that everybody in talent acquisition does, which is by complete accident. I went to college for retail management. I have a master's degree in public administration and healthcare management. I have not used any of those degrees to date. Probably couldn't tell you much of anything about public affairs or healthcare management, but somehow I just ended up in talent acquisition. I kind of segued into it when I was working in student recruitment for an adult college degree program for a couple of colleges in Indiana. And then that kind of parlayed some of those transferable skills into my first recruiting job ever that I had, which was for an experiential marketing agency when I was living in Chicago. I think what everybody describes as their first hell job, I'm sure everybody's had one in the recruiting industry, whether it was working high volume for an agency. My role was finding extremely temporary workers. I'm talking for like one weekend, we would be recruiting people to work as brand ambassadors at things like music festivals or the Super Bowl. Some of the brands we represented were like Bud Light, Vitamin Water, stuff like that. It was very interesting having to recruit in that space where they'd be like, we need 5 promo models tomorrow, find them. So from very early on, that's where I had to get creative right off the bat. I maybe had to find them on Craigslist, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere and everywhere. So I never really shied away from the unconventional sourcing methods because that's where I started off. I would say that my first like full cycle recruiting job that I had was after that role in healthcare recruiting. And I did that for about 3 years. After a while, the role didn't provide me with the mental stimulation that sourcing really does. So I bet, a lot of people started as a sourcer and they parlay into recruiting. I went the opposite way. After healthcare recruiting, I went and worked for a company called FTD Companies, which is a e-commerce company similar to 1-800-Flowers. So that's really where my career kind of took a turn with sourcing. Since then, I've led small teams for sourcing. I did that at Maxar Technologies, and now I am working at PayPal.
You've done it all within the recruiting and sourcing. Walk me through for the audience. What if someone said sourcing is just that entry level job, but in reality, you're at a top company sourcing top executives? What would you say to those people that say that's where you start, not where you finish?
I think that it comes down to a lot of misconceptions as to what the capabilities are of a sourcer. And really, depending on the company and the organizational structure, sometimes what sourcers really are either coordinators or junior recruiters. But a true advanced sourcer has a lot more technical skills than just being able to post jobs on Indeed and, basically shoot fish in a barrel with existing applicants. They're the people that you call upon when they have a difficult role where they don't have a lot of applicant flow or they're not getting the right flow of applicants. And they're really people that thrive on the challenge of that. They'll do anything from building custom search engines, sifting through open source intelligence resources, and just really thinking of things in a different way. They're the people where if they say, "Oh, you won't get a LinkedIn recruiter license in this role," they're like, "Sweet," I get to do something else. I wish that a lot of companies would change their mindset to see that A lot of the sourcers can be your key innovators within talent acquisition. There's so much more that they're capable of.
Being a sorcerer working on executive roles, you're right. The applicant flow is not there. They're not going to typically maybe have a LinkedIn profile or a lot of information about that specific role that you're targeting. And there might only be a short amount of candidates within that market, within that location that you're specifically targeting. Walk us through your approach from you get that position from the leadership team and say, "Hey, I want you to work on this. We've used all the different resources. Our recruiters can't fill it. We're not getting applicants. We need you to go find that person to bring them in." Walk me through your strategy and how it all works within the executive space.
I'm still very new to the executive space. I started supporting executive at PayPal back in August, so it's a little over 6 months at this time. What I had to learn really fast was what a lot of nuances mean within executive recruiting, and that leveling is not always going to translate the same way from one organization to another. An SVP at one company might be a senior director at our company, and really, it takes a while before you truly understand that and get a sense of that. And I think that spending some time on the research side of it is a really big component with executive. It's understanding that there can be multiple iterations that mean the same thing at the executive level. I've been able to sort of learn this over time and then figure out how to best calibrate my searches. Now, what I do is I have created a Google custom search engine specifically for executive search, and it x rays into LinkedIn for this. Essentially, I have pre built filters for the leveling. So I have a filter for VP level candidates, I have a filter for SVP candidates. And then I've kind of found that the title head of, and then whatever title is, can often be interchangeable at the senior director level, sometimes in rare cases at the VP level too. So it's kind of one of those wild card titles that I like to throw in there when I've tried everything else. So with my filters in the custom search engine, all I have to do then is type in the keywords and then I can click through and see, okay, who has these keywords at the VP level? Who has them at the senior director level? And then it kind of cuts down my work a little bit so I can get to the candidates that I need. And I've found several already that have gotten to late stages within the interview process with that custom search engine. Another great thing that I love about building my own custom search engines is they don't use LinkedIn's algorithm. And I'm going to tell you why this is really important, especially from a DIE and B perspective. Unfortunately, there is a significant amount of bias that's coded right into LinkedIn's algorithm. Um, so essentially, this runs off of Google search algorithm and it prioritizes relevance rather than completion of profiles. And I'll tell you why this is important. So oftentimes, there are candidates that will not use their profile picture for fear of discrimination. If you do not have a profile picture on LinkedIn, it marks you as having an incomplete profile. LinkedIn's only going to show you the top 1,000 results, even if there's 11,000 people that meet that criteria. They're going to prioritize complete profiles rather than relevance. So it's always great to mix up the way that you search. That doesn't mean never using the search within LinkedIn or Hire Easy or multiple tools. You should use them all and rotate through them so that you're getting different results each time.
Every company
Yes.
has a different level. Maybe you're trying to fill senior director and they're a vice president, but the scope and impact is much larger with a smaller title.
Yes.
Walk me through the conversations you're having with leaders and having them understand that the opportunity is much larger, but the title is different.
It goes back to being very transparent as much as you can. Oftentimes, it can be easy to get hung up on titles, but being able to frame it as saying, hey, you're still going to manage the same amount of people, if not more. The compensation is going to be within the range of what you're looking for, and making sure that you can match on everything else other than the title is really what's important. And from a searching perspective, there's a lot of research that has to happen there as well. And oftentimes I look at the internal leaders that are already in those level positions within PayPal. And then I'll kind of look at the career trajectory that they have and use that to continue building upon my knowledge of other external companies so I can understand what translates well within our organization.
Yeah, when I was doing executive search at Meta, I always talked about scope and impact. I didn't talk
Yes.
about title, I talked about scope and impact. How many direct reports, how large is the project, and how big of a scope you have within the organization versus title driven.
Right.
So that's really good insight. In this executive space, timing is everything. Obviously, in recruiting is timing everything, but even more so if a leader's leaving an organization to lead another organization or another function, timing has to be right.
Mhm.
How do you put yourself in the best position to strike when the fire's hot?
I think a lot of it goes back to building up a large portfolio of relationships that you've had with previous roles. I can't tell you how many times, even in just 6 months of executive recruiting, that I've stayed in touch with people that I just thought were incredibly talented professionals, but for one reason or another, that one role just wasn't the right fit. And that's something that you would learn very quickly in executive recruiting is that relationships are everything. They are going to be the people that you call upon right when the opportunity strikes. And not only do you fill the role quicker, but you maintain that wonderful relationship with that person that you've been trying to find the ideal role for, maybe for months, maybe even years. But I always say, keep those people close to you because you never know when the prime opportunity is going to strike for them.
How many touch points are you having with these leaders from your first touch point to offer to them coming into the building and leading a team?
So honestly, my role is from the initial outreach, the screen, and then the handoff to the executive recruiter. However, I always keep myself as available if they have questions throughout the process. And obviously, if they end up getting an offer, I want to be the first person to congratulate them because
For sure.
eventually those are going to be the leaders you hire for as well.
How does someone find these executives outside of like a link?
The great thing about executive recruiting is these are people that are probably going to have somewhat of a digital footprint, whether they want to or not, because at the VP or senior VP level, they're going to be appearing at a lot of press conferences, press releases. Maybe they're speaking at conferences. So there's a lot of visibility to people outside of just LinkedIn. There's already been some top candidates that I've spoken with that don't even have a LinkedIn profile. And I found them in places like Crunchbase. That's a fantastic resource for finding candidates, especially at the executive level. I will say one of the limitations is if you don't have a paid account, there are monthly profile view limits, but it's a great way to find names and titles at the very least. And again, there's results I'm finding on there that I have never ever come across on LinkedIn. So that's one website I would definitely recommend. And even just setting Google alerts for specific keywords about, who's been appointed in which positions at various companies. You'd be amazed at what you could find on a talent intelligence level there.
I always had success of following the money or following earnings calls. If a company is doing really poor, they're more willing to make a move. Do you have any experience of what I call is follow the money or follow
Yeah.
the trends within the industry to capitalize on that timing?
If a company gets a new CEO, there's a good chance that a lot of top executives are willing to have another conversation. And really it's not necessarily because the new CEO is going to have, is going to implement a bad culture or anything like that. It's just that change is inevitable with new C-suite leadership. There's oftentimes with that there come reorganizations or reprioritization of major initiatives. So that kind of when a lot of senior executives are much more willing to have conversations, even if they're not actively looking to leave.
How do you tailor your recruitment strategies, sourcing executives with specialized skill set, industry experience that you're really looking for? How do you build that credibility for them to actually respond? Because I assume those executive level candidates are having a ton of people reaching out to them.
So this is one area where I say absolutely no mass outreach whatsoever. The one thing that I do miss about recruiting for ICs is I was able to get a lot more creative and sometimes even comedic in my outreach. I'm a bit more cautious about that at the executive level. I would say that you have to be very specific in your outreach about why you reached out to them. It's never going to be like, I came across your resume and I was impressed by this, that, and the other, and you have to specifically say, okay, I need to speak with you because you worked with this. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And at the executive level, I have about a 75% response rate because I'm only reaching out to 5 or 6 people at any given time. I strategically prioritize who I reach out to.
When you're supporting your leaders in house and letting them know that it's a smaller volume of candidates, but the strategy is going to be a little different,
Mhm.
how do they respond? And how do you walk through that conversation of maybe being involved in the process more so than filling, 30 IC roles?
Yeah, and I think that there kind of is that understanding at the executive level that we're not going to be pulling a list of 100 executives to reach out to them for a specific role. Sometimes I even have some hiring leaders that prefer that we do a calibration on profiles before I even reach out to any of them. So a lot of times, they're reviewing profiles with the impression that if this person responds that they're interested, I would want to talk with them. So that's kind of the path that we go down when it comes to volume of outreach.
Can you discuss what succession planning in the executive space and how that affects the overall sourcing strategy moving forward?
Yeah, I think that having succession planning, especially if your company is going through a lot of changes, is a way to reduce time in the process if you're suddenly needing to backfill someone. So, understanding what kind of skill sets you're pipelining is really going to have an impact because if someone suddenly resigns from their position, you're not starting from scratch. You essentially have a pipeline of people that you can calibrate with on the hiring leaders to come up with a strategy in a very short amount of time. So, succession planning is definitely a huge piece of executive recruiting if you ever enter the space.
Is there any specific sourcing tool specifically that worked within the executive space that hasn't worked in other areas that you've worked on?
Um, Not necessarily one that hasn't worked in other areas, but and not to do a shameless plug or anything like that, but Hire Easy has been pretty incredible for executive search. I will say that. It just really seems to understand the nuances of leveling. I would say that I use the executive filter under the skills section pretty much daily. So this allows me to really hone in on specific skill sets and attribute based hiring while also just adding in the executive filter. It's been pretty spot on for a lot of searches that I've had. But in terms of, something that works for executive, but not for ICs, I haven't really come across a lot of that. But, there's a million lists of things that work for IC that definitely don't work for exec. So that's an easier question right there. Gone are the days where I can spend most of my time sourcing on GitHub, Stack Overflow, and my favorite place to source, which is Reddit. I'm not finding too many executives on Reddit, but I'm still looking.
What have you seen how candidates at the executive level like to be reached out to? Is it emails? Is it emails? Is it text messages, calls? What have you seen? You said you had 75% response rate. What are you doing differently or what is working within the space?
Emailing directly, 100%. That's the way
Email
to.
direct.
Yep.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because a lot of these leaders don't have time to spend a lot of their day on LinkedIn. I think that it's a bias as people in talent acquisition that we think people are always on LinkedIn and, oh, of course they'll see our message there. When really there's a lot of people out there that maybe don't log in for months at a time. So getting to where they're going to see the message the quickest is really where it's at.
Technology has reshaped how we approach sourcing and recruiting. How do you think that AI and technology has transformed this industry within the last couple of years?
Well, I think that it's transformed this industry, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but I feel as though there's been leaders that have thought too quickly that they'll be able to replace a lot of the functions with AI. I personally don't think it's there yet. I do think that a lot of the mundane tasks that we have as sourcers and recruiters can be automated through AI, but it's very clearly obvious that human oversight is needed in so many areas. I mean, even in something as simple as templates that are written by AI, people can tell much quicker than you think, even if they don't have a background with an AI. And I'm sure it will get better over the years, but I really believe that it's not humans that are going to be replaced by AI. It's humans that use AI that are going to replace those that don't. And I can say from experience that working with AI enabled tools, having a background in prompt engineering helps me use those tools so much better. And I would encourage every single sorcerer and recruiter to learn basic prompt engineering. It will make a world of difference. I would even compare prompt engineering as akin to learning Boolean search, sort of understanding how to speak the language of the machine, so to say.
The best recruiters, instead of going out and finding the talent comes to them. And that incorporates personal brand, employer brand, recruiting marketing. How do you create that strong employer brand or personal brand for
Mhm.
candidates to know you in the market as a subject matter expert that know that they're going to have a good candidate experience, whether they take a job at your company or not?
I would say that it's definitely a combination of personal branding as well as employer branding. I found that the most engagement that I got on my LinkedIn posts is when I show people a little bit about who I am. And, obviously keeping it workplace appropriate. But there was one post that I had recently on LinkedIn where it was talking about shout out to all the elder emos that are still listening to the same music that they did in high school on their way to work. And I'm like, anyone else listening to the same music that they did in high school while they work? And I actually had some executives from Hot Topic and the Vans of Work Tour reach out to me saying, "Hey, if you think of any roles for me at PayPal in the future, reach out to me." And that was just so cool getting to connect with them on that level, and I'll admit, since I was supporting executive, I was like, should I keep everything very vanilla and baseline? But you know what? There's metalheads at the VP level. So don't be afraid to be yourself.
I think that's a big topic when someone transitions into the executive space. It's the overcoming the psychological size when you're in a room with the leaders or on a conversation with those leaders that you don't want to say anything stupid because they're up here. And that psychological size sometimes gets to individuals. And the best recruiters that transition into the space can remove that barrier and talk to people where they're at and be who they are. And I think that's the key to being successful in the executive space because people see right through you. If
Yeah.
you rely on AI so much that they think it's a robot, you're not going to get the response rate. They want to work with people that have their back, they have their best interests in mind, and really have a conversation being a human. And I think that's one thing. And one thing that I saw was be yourself and treat people with respect because that's really they're all people. They just have a different title and the scope and impact's a little different.
Definitely.
What advice would you offer to somebody that's starting their career, whether it's in recruiting, sourcing, executive search? What comes to mind to help them succeed?
I would say don't keep your focus too narrow on any skill set. I never anticipated a lot of things going away that are suddenly, being replaced either by technology or other sorts of functionalities. I think that, you know, it's not unusual for people to have 2 or 3 completely distinct careers throughout their life. And I think that you have to go in with the understanding that it may become necessary at some point or another. I think that a lot of sourcers are branching out into different skill sets, whether that's talent intelligence, data and analytics, AI enablement, or really anything. So really, I can't emphasize the importance of cross training enough.
Where do you find that training and the resources and the education to stay up on the latest trends, the resources that, you teach others?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much of what I know from, leaders and, voices at conferences. A lot of the people that, I followed for years with their blogs at SourceCon eventually became very good friends of mine because I'm surrounded with, these minds on on a daily basis. I sort of learn by osmosis now. I mean, several times a day, I'm either being pinged by Brian Fink or Greg Hawkes, and they're like, hey, check out this thing that I just learned, check out this tool. And the knowledge just kind of comes to you when you embed yourself with, with the minds of these very intelligent people. But aside from that, there's so much that you can seek out just on the open web these days. YouTube's a fantastic place to learn a lot of things. I specifically have been learning prompt engineering from Udemy courses, which PayPal actually gives us free access to all of those courses as a benefit for employees, which is great. So I love creating learning paths within that platform. So there's a lot out there, and there's so much of it that's free, and highly recommend doing professional development for several hours per week.
Was there a time in your career that you said, "Hey, I'm gonna take a leap of faith and get more involved in conferences like SourceCon?" Walk me through that journey and what your partnership is with them currently right now.
Yeah, so this is an interesting story is that when I was working for the healthcare recruiting company, I had asked for years to go to SourceCon because I said I want to pivot more of a career into sourcing. Got told over and over, there's no budget for it. We're not going to send you this year. Sorry. And then one quarterly meeting, our director of TA got up to give a presentation and said, oh, want to commend the top three recruiters this year. They're going to be rewarded with tickets to SourceCon. And I was not one of them. I kind of left that meeting seething with anger, and then I churned that anger into productivity. And I went on the SourceCon Facebook group and I said, I'm ready to drop my own money. I'm ready to take PTO to go to this event, whatever it takes. Is it worth it? And the community immediately, started commenting like, Cindy Davis was on that thread, Randy Bailey was on that thread, and they were all like, it's made a world of difference for my career. But before you drop your own money, we're going to introduce you to Shannon Pritchett. She's the editor, and there's a way you can earn your ticket for free. And I did, and I submitted the 6 blogs needed to get a free ticket. And before I even made it to SourceCon, another company sourced me before that date, and they said, we'll send you to SourceCon if you want to go that badly. And I thought SourceCon was kind of going to be a means to an end. I'd go once, learn some things, move on with my life. A year later, I was speaking at SourceCon, and now I've helped write 4 different hackathons. I'm on the 5th one with Ben Solomon and Susanna Fraser and Phil. So it's a great team this year.
Walk me through what that hackathon is and what do they expect when they go to a SourceCon from maybe their first one ever to a seasoned vet.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about exactly what a hackathon is at a sourcing convention. And because of that misconception, I actually did not participate in the hackathon at my very first SourceCon. I literally thought it was going to be sitting there coding. And I'm like, I don't know how to code. I'm a sourcer. Like, I know that some people do that, but I don't. It's really more of an online scavenger hunt. And I would tell everybody, whether you are an absolute beginner or a seasoned pro, everyone should try the SourceCon hackathon because for one thing, it's a learning experience for everyone at every level. We start out with the questions being very easy in the beginning and then they get progressively harder. But I encourage everyone to stay till the end, even if you don't get that many questions, because we go through the solutions at the end. And that's really where I got the wheels turning for figuring out new and innovative ways to find people, to find contact information. It's from a lot of things that I learned from solutions within a hackathon. It really makes you think about things in a different way and understand exactly what's being asked as well. So, it's really been an incredible experience being able to be on the other side and help to write some of these questions as well. I still don't know how they chose me because you got 3-time winners like Susanna and Ben, and I'm a 3-time hackathon loser. So, you know, I guess it works.
Taking a hackathon, how can you apply the things that you learn to your everyday application in your everyday work?
It can be as simple as realizing that if you've got this incredible candidate that's maybe harder to find a digital footprint on, you would be one of the rare recruiters that might be able to reach out for them because they'll take a few extra steps to find an email or find a phone number. And something as simple as that can make a major impact on your career as you going the extra mile that other people may not be capable of.
You said impact in your career. A lot of these conferences, relationships get built extending beyond a handshake. Who comes to mind that's really made an impact in your sourcing career?
Brian Fink has been an incredible mentor for me for most of my career. Greg Hawkes for sure. Um, Really, there's so many. Cindy Davis, Susanna, so many incredible people to mention. My career would not be what it is without all of these people helping me learn and even recommending me as a new voice within the industry. I had always gone into these conferences thinking, "Oh, only leaders at the executive level are allowed to speak at these," when it turns out that that's not true, that everyone at every level has a story to tell or something that they can teach that everyone will learn. So being able to find a community that lifts up new voices is incredible. And, I wish more people knew about that. There's so many other voices out there that I think that should be heard within the talent acquisition space.
If you went back and traveled back in time, knowing your story now, what is one piece of advice that you would tell yourself?
Make sure to buy as much Ethereum as possible when it's only $5 a coin.
Love it.
No, but, in all seriousness, I would say that if I could tell my younger self anything, it's that one of these days you'll find what you're good at. I had always struggled when I was younger with not being conventionally, good at school, if that makes sense. I always struggled with math and science courses, and it made, high school and college very challenging for me. But being able to find something like sourcing, I feel like I discovered very late in life that I can be exceptional at something. And I think that that comes as a frustration for a lot of people that, it's never too late to find something that you're really good at.
It's funny that you say that. I had a similar path as you. I was sitting in math classes and, the classic scenario, car A left from Minnesota to Florida and at this time, and the car B left at this time. Who got there faster? And I'm like looking at that and I'm like, there's so many other factors that go into who's going to make it there. Like, what kind of cars are they driving? Who are they with? How many people have to go to the bathroom at a certain time? Like, that's how my mind worked. There wasn't a right answer. And I think for people like you and I, thinking things differently in another way outside of the box really has helped our careers.
I agree. And I just really, I'm grateful that I found this community because I don't know that my career would be what it is if I hadn't discovered that there's a whole other world of solutions for solving problems with talent acquisition.
You hit home on the community aspect. What does community mean to the recruiting and sourcing and talent acquisition world?
I mean, community is just it goes beyond just learning sourcing skills. I would say that community comes down to more than just, helping each other learn better. It can even just be moral support. Nobody understands the struggles of trying to explain the value of sourcing to leaders that maybe don't quite get it than other sourcers because we have so many similar struggles day to day within within organizations, and we can share our insights into how to work through that. So it's the friendships are not anything to that's not anything to minimize within the community. It makes a bigger impact for a lot of us than you might believe.
What is one thing that the recruiting industry needs or an area of opportunity that hasn't been solved yet?
So I think that there seems to be a disconnect when it comes to professional development within TA. There's always such a push for, sourcers and recruiters to scale up their skills, but it never seems to be prioritized in the right ways that it should. We're all going through a market that we haven't seen in a very long time. And, with a lot of roles either being canceled or scaled back, ideally, what I would have liked to see industry wide across, a lot of companies that have done layoffs is taking the slow times as an opportunity to get better at their skills, to cross train, to realign maybe other areas that do need help rather than making swift decisions to make a reduction in force with labor. And I think that being able to prioritize cross training and professional development long term would actually have a greater effect than simply deciding to reduce force when things are slower.
What is your go-to interview question to assess candidates?
What would your current employer miss most about you if you were to leave?
And what was the most crazy answer that you've ever had on that?
I've never really had any crazy answers on that, but I would probably say that a lot of people say that their former employees would miss the mentorship and energy that they bring to their team. So a lot of the, you know, less tangible skills that you don't hear on the resume.
If I have to go to the Chrome store, I need to have this app to be successful in 2024.
I've got to have the one tab app. It's fantastic when I'm opening way too many tabs in LinkedIn. I can just click that extension and then it collapses them all into one. And then it even can organize them into lists. So if I'm sourcing for a certain role, I can collapse all those tabs into one list. I can name it and then I can share that actually as a standalone web page. And that can be a way for either, an exec recruiter that I'm supporting or a hiring manager to quickly look through all those links and say, reach out to this person, that person, that person. So it's a great resource, especially if maybe you don't have access to a LinkedIn recruiter license. But it's a quick way to share a nice bunch of profiles all at once.
Any recommendations on a favorite book, whether it's professional or non-professional, that you would recommend?
Let's see. I got a couple here. Oh, okay. So this was a recommendation of Brian Fink, The Joy on Search by Daniel M. Russell. It's a Google Insider's Guide to Going Beyond the Basics. It's not necessarily, all applicable to sourcing, but it's just kind of one of those books that makes you think a little bit differently. And another read that I really enjoyed was Without Their Permission by Alexis Ohanian, who is one of the co-founders of Reddit. Just a very interesting story in how they built the blueprint of that whole platform.
You talked a lot about up leveling your skills and you doing courses on prompt engineering and stuff like that. What is one course the recruiting and sourcing community needs to up level their skills?
Oh gosh, I don't know that there's any one, and I think that it would vary based on what they're recruiting for. I still maintain that a couple of courses that I took on front end development of all things changed my career trajectory forever within tech sourcing. And it wasn't specifically related to recruiting, but it was the one thing that finally made it click and made me understand exactly what a software engineer does. And I took a couple of 3-hour each courses with general assembly that were free. I learned a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS, a little bit of JavaScript. And that's when I finally was able to have intelligent conversations with software developers rather than just an outsider looking in. So honestly, whatever you're sourcing or recruiting for, get into the actual seat of that person if you can. And there's a lot of resources out there to do that.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience as we wrap up?
If you haven't become part of the sourcing community yet, reach out to us. We'd love to get to know you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for tuning into the Speakeasy podcast. Uh, Erin has spoke on executive recruiting, hackathons, and everything in between. So please, if you like this episode, feel free to like, share with the community. And if you're looking for other resources to up level your skills, join the Outbound Recruiting Academy at Hire Easy. But remember, recruiting expertise meets innovation always here on the Speakeasy podcast. Thanks again, Erin, for all your support and your conversation.
Thank you.